Shalom and welcome to the One Pasuk podcast, where the rabbis at Congregation Avas Torah each share an insight on one particular pasuk from the parsha and reflect on each other's ideas. Rabbinic banter, I like to call it. I am Chaim Pupko, and I am joined by my dear friends and teammates, Rabbi Daniel Goldberg,
Shalom,
and Rabbi Morty Jesus.
Shalom.
If you'd like to sponsor an upcoming episode, please contact the shul. All right, here we go.
לב אל לב נפתח ונראה את האור שבשמיים יחד לב אל לב.
Before we get to our one pasuk, we'd like to welcome our guest, Englewood's very own Rabbi Shmuel Konikov, who, together with his wife Didi, lead the Chabad of Englewood. Rabbi Konikov also teaches in Moriah, but it's very special that Rabbi Konikov should be the shliach here in Englewood, since he grew up right here in Englewood. His father, Chazan Velvel Konikov, was the shul's cantor for many, many years, and so it's only fitting. In fact, I believe you are the first Englewood native to be on the One Pasuk podcast.
Definitely a privilege.
Thank you. So, first of all, I want to ask you a couple of questions, then we'll dive in. What was it like growing up in Englewood, especially in a Chabad Hasidic family?
So it was definitely a unique, it wasn't the typical Chabad environment.
I would say the opposite. I think it's the typical Chabad environment.
Well, now it definitely is a typical Chabad environment. But growing up as a Chazan, went to Yeshiva in North Jersey. I enjoyed it a lot. But I see over the years how the Englewood community has really changed from when I was a kid, seeing the community getting more involved in Torah learning, with various Rabbanim. Just the fact that we even have a podcast here in Englewood, that was not something which was around when I was a kid.
I can't believe they didn't have a podcast. It's unbelievable. Actually,
My son turned to me a couple of weeks ago and he said, Tati, you and I both grew up here together. It's just like we share the same background, and it was actually very cute.
All right, let's dive into our one pasuk. Our one pasuk for this week, for Parshas Vayeitzei, comes from Paraklav Ches, Pasuk Yud Aleph, chapter 28, verse 11. Vayifga b'makom. Yaakov has departed the home of his parents, Yitzchak and Rivka. He's fleeing from Esav, and on the way, during his flight, it says, Vayifga b'makom, vayolen sham kiva hashemesh. He came upon a certain place, and he stopped there for the night, for the sun had set. Vayikach me'avnei hamakom, vayasem marashosa, vayishkav b'makom avu. Taking one of the stones of that place, he put it under his head, and he laid down in that place. And we know that this is the place in which Yaakov is going to have that divine revelation in the dream with the ladder and the angels. Obviously, so much to talk about in this pasuk. Rabbi Konikov, would you please kick us off as our guest?
Sure, absolutely.
I hope you brought something Hasidus-based.
Hardcore Hasidus is coming.
I got nervous he's going to start dropping like a, Reb Yeruchim on us or a Rav.
I was going to bring the Vilna Gaon, but the pasuk Vayifga b'makom, where Yaakov reaches the place, it says Vayasem. He takes he takes the stones and he places them around his head. And the Lubavitch Rebbe says, it's an interesting question. He places these stones around his head, as the commentaries explain, to protect himself from the wild animals that existed in that place. Then why didn't he just cover his whole body? Why would he only protect his head? And obviously everything in Torah has a significance. So really what significance is there for us in 2025? The fact that Yaakov protected himself. Yaakov, I'm sure, did many other things as well. So why do we need to know that? So the Rebbe explains that Yaakov was preparing himself at this crossroad in his life, going into Haran. He was going into a place which he was not really accustomed to. He was living a Torah lifestyle, learning in Eretz Yisrael, in the Yeshiva of Ever. And he was in a Ish Tam. He was a person of simplicity, but also of completeness. And he was learning in a state of holiness, going into a world where he's going to be introduced to a swindler, into a place of deceitfulness. He was preparing himself, putting rocks around his head, realizing that even though he's going to be involved in this type of environment, his head, which is the most important part of a person, means his mind, his thoughts, should always be reserved for a sense of holiness for Hashem. Even though his hands are going to be involved and his body is going to be involved, in the physical, in the involvement of Lavan. Nevertheless, he's going to protect his head. And we could take this. It's a pasuk in David HaMelech says, "Yegia kapecha ki tochel," that you by the work of your hands you should eat. Ashrecha v'tovlach. If you do that, it's praiseworthy. What does it mean that you work by the work of your hands? That when a person is a lesson for us. When a person is going out into the world, you get up in the morning and you're engaging in the world is olam hasheker, a world of confusion. It's not so apparent that there's holiness in the world, and a person has to engage the world, has to go to business. And King David says, "Yegia kapecha ki tochel," that you should apply only the parts of your body that your hands. Don't put your primary thoughts, your primary function, your mind should be dedicated for Hashem. Surround those with stones. And when a person does that, ashrecha v'tovlach, when a person puts his mind and dedicates his primary passion and primary involvement should really be dedicated for Hashem, ultimately, this is the way you could be protected going into a land of Lavan. To follow up with a short story, there was a chassid who went to his Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he was complaining that his business was really, really going down the tubes. He had what they call the galoshes business, the boot industry, where he would have these rubbers that go over the boots in the nice Russian winter. And he was in tremendous debt. And he was overwhelmed. He came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe looks at him and says, "I've seen people with their feet in their boots, but I've never seen people with their head in their boots." In other words, your problem is that first you have to realize, take your head out of your business, put your head primarily into dedicated for Hashem, and then everything else will resolve.
I think it's fascinating that of all the Divrei Torah that you shared, that this is the one that you shared, because I feel like it is also so core to the challenge of being one of the shlichim worldwide, wherever you may find yourself. You're kind of signing up to put yourself in a foreign context religiously. Not every place is Englewood, right? You know, sometimes you're in far-flung places, but how do you go and expose yourself in that way to these cultures and yet maintain and actually be like a fortress of Yiddishkeit? So it felt very resonant with just, Right.
I also love that it was that Hasidish. I mean, you could not get a more Hasidish word. Like, if you would have been kind of like teetering on the edge here, I'm not sure I would have been thrilled. But I'll also focus on the same words. Rashi brings a famous midrash on the words Vayasem Ashotav. He put the rocks around his head. And Rashi brings a very peculiar midrash. Evidently, there was this huge war that broke out amongst the rocks themselves. Zot omeret alai yaniach tzadik et rosho. This rock says, no, I want Yaakov to put his head on me. And the other rock says, V'zot omeret alai yaniach. Miyad asa'an HaKadosh Baruch Hu even achat. God miraculously turned all these individual stones into one large stone in order to be able to say everybody has the opportunity to have Yaakov's head. As the pasuk later tells us, Vayikach et ha'even, he took the stone. Here it says multiple, Vayikach me'avnei ha'makom, and later it refers to it in the singular, clearly indicating that Hashem performed this miracle. Now the great Sifrei Musar ask an obvious question. Yaakov's head is what, like 6-8 inches maybe? So who cares that he turned all of these rocks into one rock? At the end of the day, only a very, very small part of the rock is going to be experiencing the privilege of having Yaakov's head rest on it. So what was the point of the miracle in the first place? What did it accomplish? Why weren't all the other portions of this one huge rock bickering and saying, how's this even fair? What happened to my head? Yaakov, move your head. No, evidently that solved the problem. And the obvious question is, how so? And the Chachamim explain that when it comes to people being viewed as one unit, nobody bickers. If we're all in this together and you're taking the lion's share, I can deal with that. But the second I feel less than, or the second I don't feel part of what you're trying to accomplish, that's when I'm going to resist. God said, look, all you rocks are one large rock. And so you think that rocks really cared at that point, that they're not directly beneath Yaakov's head? Yaakov is supporting his head on us. And when we view this as Am Yisrael, as one unit, and it's unfortunate, but when tragedy strikes, like this week we learned of a horrific tragedy with one of the Chabad Shlichim in the UAE, the whole Jewish world is up in arms. But we're not all Chabad Hasidim. We're lucky enough to be in the presence of one today. But Everybody, it bothered everybody. There are times where we view ourselves as ha'evan, one huge unit. And it's those times, the inspiration that we can take from those times to recognize that suddenly nobody really cares. We're all Orthodox, we're all religious, we're all Jews, we're all connected to Hashem in one way or another, and that's all that really matters. That was the lesson that Hashem was showing us by making all these rocks into one, even though they weren't necessarily able to accommodate Yaakov's head individually.
So interesting you're saying that, especially it's so appropriate now, especially today we're going to be seeing the funeral of the rabbi in Abu Dhabi. And like you said, the whole world was up in arms over what happened. We all felt it. You know, when the story of the Mendel Bayless trial with the blood libels, at the time, they were accusing the Jewish community, not just Mendel Bayless, but the entire Jewish community was put on trial. And the Rabbanim at the time had to put up a defense. So one of the arguments were that they said, it's interesting, in the Torah it says the word, there's singular and plural for different words in the Torah. It's like ish, you have anashim, man, plural is anashim. But for Adam, it says Adam is only in the singular. And their argument was that Adam, it says Adam ki yamut ba'oel, when a person will die in a tent, and it says Atam krim Adam ve'in umot ha'olam krim Adam. You're called the Adam, but the Gentiles are not called Adam. See, you look at the Gentiles as subhuman. So the argument was that the word Adam was specifically chosen because the Jewish people, when we're united like Adam, when you put one person on trial, the whole Jewish community feels it. And especially when we go through a tragedy, when we have an experience like we did yesterday and the day before, we're feeling the pain of one Jew, the entire Jewish community feels the pain collectively. We're all Atam Kriyam Adam.
So I just want to note a subtlety in the pasuk that is easily overlooked. It reflects a broader idea that I think is more evident in these pasukim, but I want to draw our attention just to the tension between two clauses, one after the other. It says, Vayifka b'makom. Yaakov arrived at the place. So if you got to the place, so then you stop there because you've hit some sort of destination. But then it says, Vayolin sham ki ba'ashemesh. He went to sleep because the sun set, which is to say, he had no idea that he arrived at the place. Yeah, he went to sleep because the sun set, and this was the moment when it was just natural for him to go to sleep. So there's this tension in the pasuk, and so the Mefarshim explain, Ba'makom could be Makom HaMikdash. Right? It's the place in the sense that it's this lofty, amazing place. But just putting those two clauses together, I know it's a very simple observation, but what we see is that it was Ba'makom. It was the place, but he only went to sleep because it was time to go to sleep. He had no idea. And just this idea that sometimes in our lives, we're kind of going about things and it's the normal, natural course of events. And yet it's hamakom or bamakom, right? It's like, this is some awesome place. And we miss it. It's easy for us to miss it. And Yaakov's whole story of waking up, and this is Anmat Kodesh, right? V'anochi lo yadati. It's a reminder to all of us that it's so easy to just like kind of be going through the motions and to sometimes miss, like, wow, this is hamakom. This is like a great, lofty moment. I think about it sometimes in shul and davening. Like people are like, we come to shul because it's Shabbos morning, and it's, but like this is, if you're kind of tuned in and if you're tapped into the moment, it can be hamakom. It could be the place. It can be so great. It can be so powerful. It can be so transformative. And it's a paradigm that we all kind of fall into. And Yaakov falls prey to it. He doesn't know. He doesn't really. V'anochi lo yadati. And to me, it's just like it's very relatable in a certain way. And it's like it's a reminder to try to have your radar tuned up to always make sure you catch it when you're in hamakom, when you're in the place.
So I actually wanted to speak about the same medrash that Rabbi Jesus mentioned. When we think about the midrashim that stand out most prominently when we learn Chumash for the first time, so there's the frogs, right? That's, frogsism, but up there is also the stones, right? The stones that fought to be under the head of the righteous person. And Rashi cites this. But the question is, what's the lesson of that medrash? We grew up with this medrash, but I don't know if we really grew up with the lesson. Maybe there's an implicit lesson in unity. Anyways, Rav Yehuda Amital explained this medrash as follows. He said there's another medrash that comes along with it that says that it wasn't just a bunch of stones. There were 12 stones. There were 12 stones, and they fought, and they were miraculously put together and put under the head of Yaakov. And when you hear the fact that there were 12 stones, so then obviously you realize that this is a medrash that says that this moment was foretelling, the destiny of Yaakov. But what this medrash is teaching us is that in order to build a Jewish nation, we're going to need a lot of different people all pulling together. Okay. Abraham and Sarah, they had Yitzchak, but Yishmael wasn't part of the bris. And Yitzchak and Rivka had Yaakov, but Esav wasn't part of the bris. But Yaakov, what this medrash is showing us, is going to have stones, going to have children, progeny, who will also be in conflict, but they will find a way to all come together and pull together to be one nation, the 12 Shvatim. Now, it's a beautiful idea, and what Rav Amital says with it is that we can't have one monolithic nation. It's impossible. People are different. People need a closer community. And so there are very different paths, very different ways of serving Hashem. And that's why we have these 12 Shvatim as opposed to just one Am Yisrael. 12 Shvatim because there are different ways to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom. And each one advocates for their own way, and that's a good thing. What it made me think about, though, is that if Yaakov has a dream of 12 somethings, then it reminded me of the fact that Yosef has a similar dream. Yosef has a dream of 11 and the sun and the moon, or the sheaves of wheat. But Yosef also has a dream of this entire family. And in Yosef's dream, they're bowing down to one of them. But I think that goes perfectly in line with what Yaakov's dream was about, is because all of these different groupings within Am Yisrael, within Klal Yisrael, they should strive to be leaders. They should all strive to be leaders. They shouldn't just say, like, okay, you do your way, I'll do my way. No, they should want to have an impact on each other, because I've always felt there's this value in the Gemara that's so important, kinas sofrim tarba chachma, that the jealousy of scholars increases wisdom. When we have like a certain healthy competition, when we engage with approaches that aren't our own, and we have confidence in ours, and we want to learn from others, everyone benefits. And that's how I have such an appreciation for the different communities across the Jewish landscape that approach things differently, because that's how we were destined to be. And it enables different Jews to find their place in different places. And so you have Chabad houses throughout the world in places where the light of Torah hadn't been brought yet. And you have Chabad houses in communities where there are other shoals. And I've really grown to appreciate how these communities benefit from having the different Shvatim all playing in the same sandbox, all learning from each other, engaging with each other. It's like the stones that they're different, but they all come together underneath the head of the tzaddik, and we all benefit when we have different Jews from different walks of life and different places that people can find themselves in the community. And I credit Rabbi Konnikov for coming and doing that, because that's the culture here in Englewood. In Avos Torah, myself, Rabbi Kishus, Rabbi Goldberg. We have Rabbi Reichman, we have Rabbi Block, we have Rabbi Genak, and we have Rabbi Konnikov. And Baruch Hashem, we are blessed to have these different institutions which all offer their own flavor, the different rabbis. And it represents the Shvatim, it represents the stones that come together to all pull in the same direction. And it's really very inspiring.
If you look just around the table, we have a Chabad Chassid, we have two proper Litvaks, we have a Yeki here, we can't say who or why he's here, and then there's a Sephardic rabbi. So there's this is that kibbutz goliot, that this is those 12 stones coming together for a common theme to share words of Torah, and I'm incredibly grateful to be a part of it.
It's actually beautiful. It's like a symphony when you have multiple different types of musicians coming together, bring it all together. I think I don't know what the saxophone is, but it's all a beautiful symphony here in Englewood.
We're blessed. We're blessed.
No.
Thank you, Rabbi K. All right.
Great Shabbos, everybody.
יחד לב אל לב נפתח ונראה את האור שבשמיים. יחד לב אל לב נפתח בתקווה לאהבה, ורק אם נאמין ובלי שום דאווין בדרך העולה, זה שיר לאהבה. ורק אם נאמין ובלי שום דאווין בדרך העולה זה שיר לאהבה